Hello, my name is Jessica Stauffer, and this is my Module 2 video reflection. Question number 1 asks, how am I or how can I using theories of self to understand what shapes and motivates students in my class with the goal of more effective instruction? As a volunteer, one thing that I can work on is I can use theories of self to understand what shapes and motivates students in my class with the goal of more effective instruction by using the theory of self-efficacy. According to the lecture on Chapter 6, self-efficacy is the belief to achieve, meaning if you believe that you can achieve and that you will be successful, you have the power to do so. The book stated on page 115 that self-efficacy strongly influences many classroom behaviors including task engagement, performance anxiety, stress, persistence, and use of academic or social coping strategies. I think that this is an important thing to consider because the student's self-efficacy can completely control and alter how they perform in the class. One way that I can work on this with my students is to tell them that they have control over their successes. We can do this by empowering the students to find the tools that they need to be successful. I can sit with my students and explain to them that they feel as though they are horrible in math and therefore they are performing horribly in math. What I can do to work on this with my students is to change their way of thinking. We can change their way of thinking by saying, okay, what caused me to miss these problems? Did I not know the answers? Did I not allow myself enough time management? Or did I simply need to practice more? By finding the triggers to this, we can really improve how we view ourselves and how we view our performances. Another way that I can improve with my students is to talk to them about expectations that I have for them as students. By discussing the expectations that I have for my students, I feel like I'm setting them up for success. I'm able to pinpoint exactly what I want from them, so there's no question about it, and I'm able to hold them to a degree and sense of accountability by letting them know what I'm expecting of them. I can also talk to them about proximal goals that I have for them upon the completion of each unit as is discussed in the book on page 127. I can do this by saying at the end of this unit, you need to know how to spell the word railroad or something along those natures. I'm trying to kind of pinpoint it to what I would do as a volunteer right now. And I also think it's also important for my students to come up with a list of expectations that they have for me as their instructor. This way that we're holding each other accountable to a set standard. And another way that I can use the theories to understand what shapes and motivates my students is that I can try to let the students make meaningful choices. I can do this, and I have been doing this through my work as a volunteer by allowing the students the opportunity to pick out the books that we're going to be reading together to work on the reading and the reading comprehension. When I allow the students the choice to pick out what they read, they're able to pick out something that interests them, and they're more likely to be engaged in the material because it's something that they're curious and they're interested to learn more about. Just by simply having these choices for the students makes learning a little more meaningful for them. And it really sets the tone for the class because the student feels not only that you're involved in their learning and that you care that they're happy, but you're also setting them up to be excited about the material. And I think students would be more motivated to learn if you're catering your teachings to things that are specific to what they want to learn and what they want to know more about. The second question was, how can I use theories of creativity and problem solving, including Dewey's thoughts, to make my instruction more problem-focused and authentic? To make my instruction more problem-focused and authentic, I can work on using reflection as a tool. Dewey discusses this on page 10, that it's important to have reflection after completing something. That way you can see where your successes are, where your weaknesses are, and then you can continue to build and improve on those things. I would also like to do this based upon the lecture. We talked about teachers can promote critical thinking by allowing students the opportunity to brainstorm all the time. I can do this now with my work as a volunteer by giving my students an outlet to brainstorm, where I can start asking them more thought-provoking questions. For example, if the student tells me that there's a supervolcano under Yellowstone National Park, I can start asking more thought-provoking questions of my students to brainstorm as to how do they think that supervolcano was created? Why do they think that animals are fleeing Yellowstone National Park? Questions like that provoke my students to think and to be able to respond and come to their own conclusions. Another way that the lecture discussed was that you could have your students compare and contrast different information. I can do this with my students now by having them compare and contrast the differences between various things, for example, that we're reading about. For example, the student could compare and contrast supervolcanoes as opposed to a regular volcano. I'm not a science teacher, so I don't know the scientific, specific terms, so bear with me. And another thing that the lecture discussed was that we can be careful not to give answers, but allow the students to ask the question and to find a way to formulate the answer themselves. I think that's an important way that I can really work on my instruction to make it more problem-focused and authentic for my students.